Our guest today is very special. It's the wonderful musical theatre and cabaret artist, Natalie Gamsu. Natalie, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Geoff. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, everyone.
It's a great pleasure to have you. I think from Sydney at the moment.
Yes, I'm in Sydney. I left Melbourne about 5 weeks ago.
Very good.
So,
probably a good decision. It's good to have you here. I know
Thank
that over the last years, we could have found you in any one of a number of places, certainly Berlin, London, New York, and before that, South Africa. But I'm going to start by asking you how you came to be born in Namibia, of all places.
Well, my father was born there, and because my grandfather left Lithuania, that part of the family, Lithuania, the other part, Latvia, and they left in about 1913 when the Jews were allowed to leave and go either to America or to Africa. They got on a ship which docked in what was then Walfish Bay, which was part of South Africa, and is now part of Namibia, and that, you know, introduced them to that barren landscape of sand dunes. And I always imagine, like, from one barren landscape to another, you know, from snow to desert, what it must be like. And then he became a traveling salesman and set up Southwest Wholesale in Windhoek. And that's where we were, with this little Jewish community in Windhoek.
A small community, though, wasn't it, Natalie, I'm presuming?
Very. I mean, there were often not enough men for a minyan. So the women, it was Orthodox. And so we did sing, you know, we were part of whatever had to be done. We had it, you know, I think it was a bit of a punishment for a rabbi to be sent there because it was nowhere. But we eventually got this fantastic Rabbi Chaim Perez, who used to be at the Maroubra Shul, actually. And he...
My local rabbi, absolutely.
Yeah. And he really transformed that little synagogue. He brought bongos and he jived up some of the melodies, and he was just fantastic. But
schooling then, of course, meant you would have had to have gone away at that point. Now, so what was the next move for Natalie?
At 14, I left and I went to Cape Town. I went to Wynberg Girls High. I was desperate to get out of Windhoek. I wanted a city, I wanted life, I wanted theatre. And then I left Wynberg and went to the Waldorf School, which I love, the Steiner schools. And from there, I went to the University of Cape Town and studied drama for 4 years. And then I moved to Johannesburg, which is really sort of where the heart of theatre was.
Very much so, very much so. And music theatre in particular, I know that we'll call it straight drama, but but drama as well as music theatre has been your thing throughout your career. But did you gravitate straight away to the musical side of things?
No, not at all, because we didn't really do music theatre very much actually we did do some at drama school, but I just really couldn't get any work when I left drama school. My first agent said to me, darling, you're not going to work until your 40s, your late 30s, early 40s. And I was 22 and I was absolutely devastated. And I said, why? And she said, because you're not pretty. You're never, ever going to be a young ingenue. And you're too young to play character roles, and you're just going to have to wait. And so, and it was such wonderful honesty, you know, because it was the truth. And so luckily, I connected with Joanna Weinberg, who I know you know and you've worked with. And she and I formed a cabaret duo called Strict Tempo. And we were really successful, and we worked and worked and worked. And from that, I began to get music theatre work and television. So I just, you know, from a young age, I learned that I would have to create my own work, and I'm so grateful for that.
Now, television is an interesting one, because I know that you worked on a couple of, one in particular, long-running series. I think there might have been an award in amongst there as well too. So definitely screen as well as stage. Tell us a little bit more about the experience of working in television.
I did a Greek series called The Big Time, because in South Africa, there are a lot of Cypriots that came after the war. And it was brilliantly written. It was directed by a very, very good South African director called Gray Hofmeyer. And I played the Reni, and he was wonderful, married to Stavros. And it was a very successful series. And I went to live in New York, and then they did the second series, and I was lucky enough to be flown back to do the second series. So that was an amazing experience. That was my only really big, long-running television series in South Africa. I did odd little parts in film, but mostly I was by then established as a musical theatre performer.
You said New York there, which is a rather large step for any performer. But it sounds like you fell on your feet, because there's a lot of shows there, and in particular, what I'm interested in, because I think we know you from a lot of these, the self-conceived shows, the cabaret shows, the ones where you can be your own personality, if you like. I'm curious about that, because given that early advice from the agent, you having taken your career in your own hands and made work for yourself, seems like a very serious direction that you took. Tell us about the New York experience, because that's got to be the home of cabaret.
Well, I knew that I wanted something more, and I left South Africa in, I think, 1986, and I went to London and Amsterdam and where else? Greece and all over. And I just looked and I thought, I'm not quite ready. I'm not ready. And so I went back to South Africa, and I decided I needed to really hone my own one-woman shows, because Joe and I weren't working together at that stage. And then I was given an incredible opportunity to sing the duet from Carmen, where she is stabbed, in a television series, music television series in South Africa. And I suddenly, for the first time, had a kind of teaching that I'd never had vocally. And I was so excited, and I thought, I want to be an opera singer. That's what I want. And I started training, and I started auditioning. And finally, this woman in the audition said to me, darling, it's too late. By the time you go and study in Europe and learn all the repertoire, you're going to be in your mid-30s. You have a voice. Go to New York, go somewhere and study, but keep going on the direction you've been in. And while it was really painful, I'd never considered New York. I thought of London, and something just went off in my head. And I remember going to the beach and having a little bit of a weep, and then going, I'm going to New York. And I literally packed up and I was gone. 3-4 months later, I knew no one. I had almost no money. I begged someone that knew someone that knew someone for a mattress, which she agreed to, and then was furious when I arrived on the Bowery. And I literally just walked the streets, using my instinct about where to live and finding work. And then I found out about a cabaret symposium. And I remember it cost $900, and I had $1,200, like that's what I'd gone with, $1,200. And I auditioned, and I got in, and I said, I can't, and they said, all right, they gave it to me for $700. And I just knew I should do it. And it was where I met all the people involved in cabaret, and the people that ran the clubs, and Irv Rabel, who ran Club 88, and the Duplex. And I met wonderful, wonderful people. And from there, things got better, and I started to do one show after the other. And I worked with my friend Gary Carter, who I was at drama school with, and he lives in Amsterdam now, and he would write. He knows me extremely well, and he would write a lot of my shows. And the New Yorkers loved that I was from somewhere else, that I was, they love they love immigrants, or they did. This is in the 90s. And they love artists, and they love, people. It's such a culture of yes. And they just embraced me, and they wanted to know about me being Jewish, and about being African, and about traveling, and about everything. They wanted to know, and I felt so welcomed. It was wonderful.
I bet what they loved was someone who threw themselves in at the deep end, who actually took the odds to it in that way. I mean, that cabaret symposium sounds to me like a real sliding door moment in your life, let alone career. The names that you mentioned there, the venues and the connections with those venues, let's not just pass them over. They're all major iconic, venues in the New York world.
Julie Wilson was one of the teachers. Margaret Whiting was one of the teachers. Joel Silberman. I mean, these were major performers. So
no doubt when they grabbed hold of you, it was because not just exotic, but very much of that same yes culture that you just described. There's nothing more exciting or engaging than a performer that's totally committed to their craft and does everything to do it, even down to their last pennies.
Yeah.
So, musical theatre. Well, their cabaret, self-devised shows with colleagues, that kind of world. Maybe 11 years in New York, is that about right?
Something 11 and a half years, yeah. And, you know, it was tough as well. I was having to survive. I've worked hundreds of jobs. Finally got a fantastic job in a little lingerie store in Soho, which I absolutely loved. And so I did that. And I also, at that time, I was a stringer for a television company. I didn't know what I was doing, but gratefully they paid me. I'd waitressed for years at Café Un, Deux, Trois in the theatre district on 43rd Street, where I had served every famous actor and director in my little uniform, with my heart just breaking to not do that, but I did that. And I finally got an agent, and I went to Santa Fe as part of the Hispanic Festival and did a wonderful play called Fefu and Her Friends, written by Maria Irene Fornes, who was this extraordinary Cuban-American playwright, won many, many Obies, you know, not very well known, but among the writers, incredible. So I had a few really lovely things that happened, but I felt like just as it was starting, you know, after 10 years, I could feel that things were starting to move, and I was meeting people. I met a lovely young man in a coffee shop, and he's English, and he was coming to live in Australia because his father's Australian, so he could live here. And it was a terrible decision to have to make, you know. Do you leave the city you love because of the person you have fallen in love with, or do you let that go to stay in the city? And I was 41 years old and very single, and was never getting married and never having children. And I just thought, oh, come on, Natalie, you know, don't pass this up. Don't pass up the opportunity to see what it's like to be loved and to love someone.
That's and the romantic in any performer, Natalie. It's the romantic in any actor.
So I often say to him, it was the worst and best decision of my life.
Yes, yes. Well, that sounds romantic as well. So Melbourne, though, first, as the first stop. Is that right?
Sydney.
No, it was Sydney. Okay.
So I arrived here, and he had found this gorgeous little apartment in Kirribilli, which was literally the size of a bed and a couch. I mean, I'd never lived with anyone. I thought we were going to kill each other. But it had a view of water. But it was such a culture shock, Sydney, in a way that I had not experienced even going to New York or London. Or I felt like I didn't understand the listening that I was speaking into, and I didn't feel that people were particularly embracing of me. I think I was too much. You know, I had the South African energy and the New York energy, and I was probably brash and it just didn't fit with the Australian way of being. It took me many, many years to sort of calm down and to begin to understand what the listening was here.
I mean, the recreation of a career, even of a persona, I think in that situation is very challenging. Someone coming to a new country, but also, as you say, a whole new culture, and having to re-establish yourself as a performer in an established industry, you know, as a relatively unknown, when you have come from fame and success and you know, and a rich, vibrant life that you've already been engaged with. That must have been very, I won't say heartbreaking, but very challenging for for a while until you do get the pace of it and the feel of it and are known.
Yeah, it was really, I didn't know what hit me. I didn't know why it was so hard. I mean, as you said, it's not nothing to emigrate in the first place. And, I've emigrated twice, and I've been 10 years older or 11 years older every time. And that doesn't help because it's not a young person's profession as it is. So to come here in my early 40s and to start was not the smartest thing in the world. So I did what I knew to do. I decided to create a performance, and I hired the hall in Paddington, the church, and I invited people, and about 200 people arrived, and I had a little bar set up and about 200 candles, and I introduced myself in that way, and that went really well. From that, I got a teaching job, which has become a huge part of my income and my passion. And I got something called Mufti. Hayden T used to run a little cabaret at Griffin Theatre called Mufti. And I had a few goes at that. So that was great. And so slowly, it began the dots started to connect, but never in the same way that I felt in New York, certainly not on the cabaret circuit. I just felt that I couldn't really get traction in the same way. And about 5 years ago, I decided to move to Melbourne because I love Melbourne. I feel like Melbourne is the sort of New York of Australia. Sydney's more LA in a way, with pockets of things. Melbourne feels more cohesive to me. Even then, I had done Strictly Ballroom, Mary Poppins.
Yes.
I'd worked with Barry Kosky doing Women of Troy. So I had some track record, but even moving to Melbourne, it's taken about 4 or 5 years to feel that there's a kind of give. Every time you move even to a new city, you start again.
Yes, absolutely. But some big names came calling, and not to fast forward too much, but to drop a couple of them. MTC, The Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Yeah.
Fabulous shows like that. You mentioned Troy, which was already before that time, and other things like that. And of course, when coming back to Sydney, being able to do some of these fabulous original shows of your own. You mentioned, it's an interesting coincidence, having done an operatic Carmen way back that you found very, very moving. And now a different Carmen at the Hayes Theatre, really the home of cabaret in Sydney very much. And a real star turn as Carmen, Alive or Dead, which was a knockout. Tell us a little bit about that, because that's really something quite extraordinary, and which is still, I think, very much one of your calling cards as a cabaret artist.
Well, thank you.
A solo show artist, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely loved doing that show. I mean, the writer is a man called Craig Harwood, who's a very close friend of mine from New York. And we started about 6 years ago. I got a call from someone, and they were doing their Christmas party at Slide. And they said, I want something outrageous. I want a 10-minute outrageous little act. And I called my friend Craig, and we came up with this weird character, the love child of Frida, Carlo, and Leon Trotsky. And we just did 10 minutes with not original music. And I just felt a buzz in the audience. I could just feel that there was a resonance. There was something. And we thought, okay. And then I got into Strictly, and he flew out from New York, and we spent about a month writing. And then he flew back, and we wrote and wrote and wrote. And then he flew back, and we did a workshop with Mark Jones and Tyrone Park. And we invited 13 people at the end of it. And again, I thought, okay, this is something. And then we went forward. And so it's been about 5 years. And then Sean Rennie came on board as director, and Andrew Cronin on guitar and piano, and Steph Jones on violin. And we did a show at the Butterfly Club in Melbourne, and it went really, really well. And then we reworked it and went to the Hayes Theatre and to the Adelaide Festival. And truthfully, I feel like it still has further to go, and I would absolutely love to do it, but I just can't get funded. And I've been producing it for over 5 years, and it feels like we've kind of come to a stop. So I don't know. It's theatre. It's more theatre than cabaret, that. And I had engaged Stephen Nicolazzo, who is an extraordinary director in Melbourne. And we tried to take it to the Midsummer Festival, but they felt it was a little too out there. So it's been interesting. I mean, people are nervous of it.
Isn't that interesting? Look, the Hayes, which, is, as we say, a key cabaret musical theatre venue, may still have a relatively conservative theatre-going audience nevertheless. Absolutely loved it, of course. And as you say, there's so much more for this show to do, and so many more people to see it. It's a tour de force is what it is. It's a theatrical performance to take your breath away, with a character that is, as you say, overwhelming, and that you fall in love with at the same time, because she is so raw and so honest and so bizarre in the story of Frida, Carlo, and the Trotsky and everything about that. But then her story and the way she tells her story and the way it's presented. I won't get in the way. I think we have some highlights that we might be able to show on this site.
That would be wonderful.
So we will direct people to that later. But at any rate, incredible show. Definitely we expect to see more. Any producers out there, grab hold of this one, because this needs to be seen all over, not just Australia, but the world. What is next for you, Natalie? It's a weird time. So I'll ask you two things. I'll ask you first, how you're spending your time, how you're coping with this strangeness that we find ourselves in, but what do you see on the other side of it?
Well, I'm very lucky because I'm still teaching a bit. I've got about 10 hours of teaching a week that I do on Zoom. I teach at Patrick Studios in Melbourne, which is a dance school with a musical theatre course. And I teach masterclasses in audition technique and in acting through song. And so it's been working pretty well on Zoom. It's not ideal, but we've been doing that. So I feel very grateful. I am also putting together a COVID cabaret with my friend Max Lambert up the road. Wonderful. And we're going to perform it in the street. People can come onto their balconies with a glass of wine or on their front steps, and we'll do a couple of songs.
You have found the right people, one way or the other. Some of these names you mentioned just in the last few minutes are all the key people who, are like you, seeped in musical theatre and in the world of theatre in both cities. You're all going to do this together. You're in the right crowd.
Max Lambert is one of my favorite musicians and human beings, but oh my God, to sing with him, it's, I did Darlinghurst Nights at the Hayes that he wrote many years ago. He's an extraordinary artist in this country. He really is. Not as well known as I wish he was, but he's extraordinary. So we're going to do something. I've also started Zoomograms by Gamsu, singing telegrams. So if anyone has a birthday and they, I'll sing for them. But other than that, I'm painting, because I also do a lot of painting and portraiture, and I'm decorating the house and, organizing and cleaning. Work-wise, it's pretty open, I have to say. This year was looking a little bleak. Last year was a great year. The year before was bleak. This year, not much in my future right now, and everything's being cancelled. So there was something at La Mama. La Mama lost its funding. So I'm not sure what this year holds, but I feel okay for now.
You're not alone. You're not alone, Natalie, because this is the environment for the artist at the moment. But we are being resourceful, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And there is no doubt a voracious audience out there who will be so grateful for live theatre on the other side of this, and we'll be looking forward to hearing you and your next incarnation, no doubt, wherever it is, Sydney, Melbourne, the world.
From your mouth to the heavens.
Absolutely. Amen. Natalie, it's always beautiful to see you, to talk to you, to see your artwork. which I should mention was wonderfully hung at the Hayes Theatre during that season of Carmen. And it's magnificent too. So many strings to your bow. There's room for another chat about that and maybe some show and tell. But for the moment, from our matinee respective lounges, beautiful to talk with you. Thank you for joining me, and see you again very soon.
Geoff, thank you so much, and stay well to all of you, and much love from me. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.